the testimony that is supposed to be telling us of the purpose of the earth. There is a purpose of the earth. Scripture tells us this is the purpose of the whole earth. And it's telling us a story of the Messiah who's supposed to come and the battle that's standing within the heavens. It tells us that Lucifer said, I will set my throne above the Most High. I will be like the Most High. And there's actually 5 I wills, but God said, I will cast you down. And this is important because what we're seeing within the celestial heavens is when the Draco the dragon was the pole star, he was above the Most High, being the essence of the king in the celestial heavens, whose name was to be the branch. So it actually did happen. But the Hercules has his foot upon Draco's head, and the stars within Draco are telling see and tread, the subtle serpent, the fraudful serpent, to be cast down. So the idea that we've seen in the heavens has to do with the Messiah. We're seeing Ophiuchus at the height of the heavens, and Ophiuchus is a picture of he shall bruise your heel. And then underneath Ophiuchus we see Hercules, and Hercules is a picture of he shall bruise your head, because Hercules has his foot on the head of Draco, and Draco shall be cast down. So the Draco is a picture of Satan, and also an essence of Satan's son is supposed to be cast down, and that is the one who will be the Antichrist. That Satan will be cast down from the heavens, and the Antichrist will become Satan incarnate, as he is to do the things that he's supposed to do in leading this war. And actually the book of Enoch goes into that a little bit, and that it talks about that Satan was one of the angels who had come to the earth and mated with mankind, with the woman of the earth. They saw the daughters that were fair, and that God had set to judge them. They were a third of the angels, and to cast them all in the pit, but that Satan had gotten permission to take 10% of his group, of his angels, to leave them on the earth, and that their purpose was to come against man, that the blind were to lead the blind onto the pit. That Samuel was the name the Jews use for Satan as well, and that means the blind God, and he is the blind who is to lead the blind people to the pit, and that has to do with this war. In this war, the people who are supposed to be brought to the pit are those who are the blind people. And also we heard within Revelation, they're the people who destroy the earth. Well, we've already heard, we know the Hezbollah are people who destroy the earth. And also the children of Asher will be nearby the pit. They're the sides of the pit. And we have to ask, well, now who's talking about Asher? What's Asher? Well, God is speaking in one sense in prophecies that had been, and again looking towards the end of prophecies that shall be. So he sees the Babylonian nation, and he talks about that Babylon is going to be cast down. He talks about Syria as a separate entity, the king of Syria, and then he's also speaking of Asher or Assyria, and we're wondering, like, what's that supposed to be? Well, the Assyrian Empire held the area of Nineveh. They conquered Babylon, and then they turned and they conquered Syria, and they annexed it to be part of Assyria. But God is helping us with the names because he uses ancient names to try to understand the things that are coming to pass. And so we're kind of wondering who are the people of Asher and who are the people basically called Assyria here. All of Asher would be the people that are now in the area of Iraq and the area of Syria. But we do notice that there's a new group, ISIS, and called by other names, who are purposely wanting to destroy Israel. That's their purpose, is to destroy Israel, and they have now taken over tanks. They conquered Nineveh, and when they conquered different areas, they took over a lot of the gods of these temples, and these gods and the statues and a lot of the imagery of these temples. A lot of people don't know it, but what happens is underneath Babylon in Iraq, there were tunnels that Saddam Hussein used to his castles. And one, I believe, is about 17 miles that goes all the way to to Baghdad, and in these tunnels the soldiers reported that they were filled with artifacts all underneath the ground. And not only in the Iraq War did we take out things, not only in the Iraq War did Britain take out things to put in their museum from Babylon, but so we can say that Iraq, Babylon, looked for her idols and couldn't find them, just like in the prophecies of Babylon. But in addition, now the people who have come to say that they were ISIS have ISIS is a picture of, really, in Egypt, Isis was a picture of Virgo in the heavens, so that's in the heavens that we're seeing that. And Babylon's judgment is to be lifted onto the heavens. And we even find the Hercules fighters came and did destruction in Iraq. And a lot of pictures we see of Iraq, we're supposed to see that Babylon's temples are still there, but according to soldiers, Babylon has been destroyed. And that what we're actually seeing, when we see the satellite image of the area of Babylon, we'll see half of it's missing, and the other half kind of buildings that look like the old Babylon, but they really are not Babylon. That's where the soldiers of our military were kept. And for the confirmation of these facts, so first of all, you can see them from satellite imaging, which is on the internet. And secondly, if you want to, you can go to my site and you can read about it. But that's astronomicalbookofrevelation.blogspot.com. But also when the artifacts of the people who preserve the artifacts for the world were concerned about the artifacts of Babylon, and what they had been told was that we were going to give hundreds of millions of dollars for Babylon, but when they came to see it, they said, well, we would have rather that you had rebuilt Babylon than rebuilt soldiers' quarters. So what they built was soldiers' quarters. The walls kind of look like Babylon. On that half, you can see the other half where the temple was, it's been destroyed. And so Babylon has been destroyed, but it talks about how they're going to look when it's got to also go down. It's got to sink below the Euphrates. We've heard the waters of the Euphrates are rising up, and it is sinking, and that's why the people who are the World Heritage Commission could not rebuild Babylon. They wanted to rebuild it. They wanted to make it a World Heritage Site, but they realized that it is going down. And also what they found as their surprise was that there are oil tubes underneath the ancient city that now Iraq itself had been given permission to have oil wells, and their oil tunnels go right underneath the city of Babylon. And so we can see that any kind of explosion there that would take place would cause it with blazing fire to go down underneath the Euphrates, which is an event that will be coming to pass. So we're looking at timely things there, but also we're talking about people getting rich. Well, they did. There were lots of things that were stuck off from there. If you look at the World Heritage things, they talk about the Museum of Baghdad had everything raided, and also from the tunnels and from the temples there, all kinds of treasures that have been marketed around the world. The world auctions of the great auctions have been flooded with these things, and now that ISIS has gone through, they've picked up the treasures of Babylon, and it's even said on the news how they were in the underground tunnels. They found the underground tunnels filled with stuff, and so this, of course, when the city actually goes down, then of course they'll be out crying, for Babylon and its loss, and the loss of all the money. The merchants and the shipmen will be crying. So as to where we are here, this group of ISIS then conquered Nineveh, and they've gone on to the temple Palmyra, which is in Syria, and within this temple they've taken the artifacts, and then they burned the temples, and this is the judgment that's supposed to have come to these people, that through violence all of these things would take place. They're even looking at the rock of Mecca, and God's talking about the rock in the Bible their rock that is supposed to be destroyed by terror. So we could picture these people of ISIS as being the ones that are going to stand for Asher or Assyria, who Ezekiel said will be in the sides of the pit. So we're looking at the coming war, and we see that the Antichrist will enter the province. He will enter the province peacefully because he will be on the Straits of Moab, apparently sent to be the king of the Kiddim, who will be protecting King Abdullah. King Abdullah from the Jordan, the country of the Jordan, is half British. His mother was British, and of course Britain divided the countries, divided Padam Aram to the countries that are the modern countries, including the Jordan, and so King Abdullah Hussein is considered to be a peaceful man. He doesn't come against Israel in the coming war. This allows the Antichrist to enter the province peacefully and be upon the Straits of Moab, apparently as though he's protecting King Abdullah from the people of Ashur or Assyria, who are also to be in the war, and also from Syria, who is expected to attack in the war. When Damascus falls, the king of Syria will abandon Damascus, and that would be Assad today. If it were Assad, people are talking about destroying Damascus. And according to the 1 QM War Scroll, no one comes to his aid. So Russia and China aren't going to come to his aid. There'll be great panic in Japheth as though that's going to happen. But at the last minute, nobody comes to his aid. And when Damascus is destroyed, the king is not going to stay in Damascus. He is, in fact, going to be attacking Jerusalem. And all of this is going to be part of the war, and all of this is going to be the things that we're going to be seeing on the sides of the pit. So we see then when Revelation is talking of these things, that it's speaking of this war that's supposed to come, and of the saints who will be on the sides of the mountain, who will be part of the war of the 1 QM War Scroll. We also see within Zechariah, as he's talking about an image that was made where Joshua the high priest was to be a sign, and Joshua the high priest is to be a sign of the heavenly sign, and that Joshua, the name Joshua is also Yeshua. Yeshua and Yehoshua are the same name. Yeshua is kind of the abbreviation like Mike and Michael, and so this Joshua the high priest is standing for the Messiah, our Messiah, who is Yehoshua, who is to be the one who is named the branch. We read this in Zechariah 3. And he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to resist him. And the Lord said to Satan, "The Lord rebuke thee, O Satan, even the Lord that hath chosen Jerusalem rebuke thee. Is this a brand plucked out of the fire?" And Joshua was clothed with filthy garments, and stood before the angel. And he answered and spake unto those that stood before him, saying, "Take away the filthy garments from him." And he said, "Behold, I have caused thine iniquity to pass from thee, and I will clothe thee with a change of raiment. Let them set a fair mitre upon his head." So they set a fair mitre upon his head, and clothed him with garments, and the angel of the Lord stood by. And so this also was supposed to speak of Christ. It says, "Hear now, O Joshua the high priest, thou and thy fellow servants that sit before thee, for they are men wondered at. For behold, I will bring forth my servant the branch." And that's speaking of Yehoshua, Yeshua, the one who is the Messiah. And then he says, "And behold, the stone which I laid before Yeshua, one stone shall be 7 eyes. Behold, I will engrave thee with a graving. Behold, the Lord of hosts, I will remove the iniquity of the land in one day. In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, shall every man and his neighbor be under a vine and the fig tree." And so when it's speaking of the one stone with 7 eyes, the Zohar of Israel tells us that this is the foundation stone. Once again, the 7 eyes have to do with the Sefer Yetzirah, things like Hakma and so forth, that are considered to be the 7 eyes. We'll touch on that later. But the concept here is that the Messiah is the one who was from the beginning. In the beginning, when God said, "Let there be light," the name Yud-He-Vav-He, God's name, was placed upon the rock. When you add a shin to it, which is the letter of the Holy Spirit, it becomes Yehoshua or Yeshua. And when Christ died, he said, "Into thy hand I commend thy spirit." The Jerusalem is engraven upon a hand, the mold of a hand, and this rock is in the hand. It's in the city of David. And as this war takes place, this hand that has the rock is going to throw the rock to come against the giants that are supposed to be there. It actually comes to the point where the giant that David slew is supposed to actually be by Gilgal, and so this is another story of King David and the throwing of the rock as well. All of the scriptures go together to be telling the same story that we're seeing in the book of Revelation, as the book of Revelation is telling us this story that is coming to pass. Now, when Orion has his rod like onto the reed and he's measuring the temple, he's standing in a position where behind him are dogs, and dogs were a symbol of the correct position of Orion is with his back towards us, and he's told, measure not the outer court, because it's given over to Gentiles. Well, dogs were a symbol of Gentiles, and the outer court that he just passed through, which was supposed to be from the altar to the laver, and then he's standing at the incense altar. So the outer court is supposed to be behind him. He doesn't have to measure it now because he's already meted it out. And now he's standing in a position when you see the celestial pyramid, the celestial temple, which is the temple of the sun, laid out, which you can see on my site, astronomicalbookofrevelation.blogspot.com. You will see that Orion's position holds his rod right at the point of the beginning of the ascending chamber. If we picture that rod like onto a reed, and he's saying, rise and measure the temple, we have an odd situation here. Because the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, has its ascending chamber to be 1,882 inches. And 1,882 inches is a measurement, and a rod, of course, is like onto reed. That's a measurement too. And I typed those two in, 1882 and reed, and somebody else had seen this as well apparently, and they had the number, and I forgot whether it was like 5 or somewhere between 5 and 7 reeds. But another point that we need to know is that when we're speaking in the Bible of the stone which the builders rejected, and we're talking about the in that day there'll be a sign in the center, in the midst of the border of Egypt, that Isaiah had foretold, that the gematria of this story is 1882. It says, in that day there shall be a sign in an altar, and to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord. And what's amazing about that is that the gematria is 1882, and so if Orion's standing at that position where he's measuring the temple, the ascending chamber is 1882, and that's really kind of telling you that Orion is speaking of this same temple that Isaiah had talked about when he'd said the burden of Egypt is to see the Lord ride upon a cloud, and that the idols will be moved at his presence. This whole idea is that the concept of the Messiah who was to come and his story, and even when you go on in Isaiah, to fall. This was over the course of the year, but could also be seen in a vertical line. And when we see it in a vertical line, we're supposed to picture the sun would fall, but also the son of the sun would fall, which is what Ophiuchus is representing, is Orion as a young man, the son of the sun who falls. He does so over the course of the year in the apparent travel of the sun as he dies in Passover, disappearing into the belly of the whale. But we are also supposed to be able to picture this as this man would fall from the height of the heavens to the pit. We can picture it in a vertical line as this man was traveling. King David's Psalms 118, helps us to see it in a vertical line, helps us to see this man who is Ophiuchus, who is the serpent holder, who is a representative of the Son of Man as a young man, of Orion as a young man. We're supposed to picture him falling to the point of the pit. And when we picture him as the story that is built within the pyramid is the death and resurrection of Orion, and this has been given to us in myth as they tell us that the serpent holder represents Ophiuchus, and as they tell us the serpent holder is supposed to represent only one man in history, that man being Imhotep, and that Imhotep is the probable builder of the pyramid. They also let us know within the myth that the Great Pyramid was built to demonstrate the death and rising of Orion. And Orion's death and rising can be seen in the pyramid when we see the house of the sun in the vertical position and realize that this man who represents Orion on top, who is the serpent holder, is supposed to fall and rise again. He does so over the course of a year, but we can also just picture him vertically falling as we read King David's psalm, speaking of this man we're seeing on top who's being stung. So here it is, the serpent holder, another picture of Orion, is supposed to be falling. He says that you have stung me, sure, declare the works of the Lord, King David talks about, and then says the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. It is marvelous to our eyes. So in this, King David is recording the circular event of the solar house. We have blessed you from the house of the Lord. This house is the house of the sun. And in this solar house, we're seeing the death and resurrection of the sun. We asked, does the pyramid fit this? Does it fit what Manly Hall stated, that the pyramid was to raise up to the head of a man? So instead of placing the celestial pyramid just over Scorpio, we're placing it over the head, reaching up to the head of a man who is in Scorpio. That man is Ophiuchus, meaning the serpent holder, but he is supposed to represent the Messiah, whose death will come as the sun reaches the height of the heavens. Its death will come because the days are shorter from this point. As the sun reaches the height of the heavens, it's supposed to represent the day of the Lord, who is the Messiah, who will fall from this point, whose fall and rising, that is the death and resurrection, will be spoken of. Anna the prophet talked about this when Messiah Christ was brought to the temple. He said his fall and rising will be spoken of. That also